lake that returns the dead. Prologue. If you ever find yourself standing beside a lake during a storm, and you see lights where no lights should be, leave. Do not walk toward them. Do not answer if someone calls your name. And if you see a village that wasn't there before the rain began, pray that the storm ends quickly, because according to old records hidden deep within the archives of northern England, there is a lake that does not keep its dead. It gives them back. The first documented account appeared in 1887. A shepherd claimed that during a violent thunderstorm, an entire village emerged from the shoreline. The settlement stood where only water had existed moments earlier. Witnesses described cottages lit by candles, smoke rising from chimneys, church bells echoing across the water, people walking the muddy streets. The following morning, everything had vanished. Only the lake remained. Authorities dismissed the report. Then it happened again. And again. Over the next century, dozens of similar sightings were recorded. Most were ignored. Some were buried. Others disappeared entirely. Yet, one detail remained consistent. The village appeared only during storms, and every time it returned, someone who had once died returned with it. The lake itself was known as Blackwater Lake. Located deep within a remote valley surrounded by forests and steep mountains, it remained largely untouched by tourism. The nearest town was over 30 miles away. Locals avoided the shoreline after dark. They had stories of voices drifting across the water, stories of figures standing motionless in the fog, stories of relatives appearing years after their funerals. Most people laughed at those tales until 2025. That was the year a scientific expedition arrived, and everything changed. The team consisted of meteorologists, geologists, sonar specialists, historians, and documentary filmmakers. Their goal was simple: explain the legend, debunk the myth, record evidence, leave. Instead, they became part of the story, and according to the recovered files, some of them may never have truly left. Rain began shortly after midnight, the first storm of the season, powerful enough to shake the mountains. Lightning illuminated the valley every few seconds. Winds reached nearly 60 miles per hour. The team monitored the weather from a temporary research station overlooking the lake. At 1:17 a.m., one of the cameras captured something unusual: a light. Then another. Then another. At first, they assumed fishermen had entered the area, but the lights continued multiplying. Dozens, hundreds. Entire streets of illumination appeared along the shoreline. The researchers checked satellite maps. Nothing existed there. No settlement, no buildings, no roads. Yet through the storm. An entire village slowly emerged from the darkness, and every camera recorded it. Not as a blur, not as an anomaly, as something completely real. The impossible had arrived, and it was only beginning. Part 1. Dr. Emily Carter was the first person to reach the shore. She later described the experience in an audio journal recovered from her equipment. The recording begins with heavy breathing, rain striking her jacket, the distant sound of thunder, then her voice. Calm, measured, professional. At first, I can see houses. A pause. They weren't here earlier. Another pause. I know that sounds ridiculous. Lightning cracked overhead. The recording continued. There are people walking around. A longer silence followed. Then something changed in her tone. Fear. Real fear. They're looking at me. The recording ended abruptly. When the rest of the team arrived, they found Emily standing motionless near the water. She appeared pale, shaken, unable to speak. For nearly 20 minutes, she simply stared toward the village. Finally, she whispered a single sentence. My mother is there. The statement confused everyone. Emily's mother had died 6 years earlier from cancer. The team assumed stress had caused a hallucination. Until they looked. Standing near one of the cottages was a woman matching every photograph of Emily's mother. Same face, same clothing, same age. Exactly as she appeared shortly before her death. The woman smiled, raised a hand, and disappeared into the village. No one spoke for several minutes. Science had no explanation. Neither did anyone else. They entered the settlement at 2:03 a.m. The streets were muddy. The buildings felt solid. Doors opened. Candles burned. Fireplaces crackled. Everything appeared real. Painfully real. One historian compared the architecture to photographs taken in the late 19th century. Every structure matched. Every road, every fence, every detail. As though an entire lost community had somehow survived beneath the lake for over 100 years. Then came the church bells. 3 slow rings echoed through the storm. Every villager immediately stopped moving. Silence spread across the settlement. Even the wind seemed to fade. The villagers turned towards the lake, together, without speaking, without emotion, and began walking. No one tried to stop them. No one even spoke. The researchers simply watched as hundreds of villagers moved through the rain toward the shoreline. Men, women, children, elderly couples, entire families. They walked slowly, their lanterns glowing like distant stars beneath the storm. Not a single person looked frightened. Not a single face showed emotion. It was as if they had performed this ritual thousands of times before. The lake stretched before them like black glass. Lightning illuminated the water. For a brief second, the entire surface reflected the village. But something felt wrong. Very wrong. The reflection contained more buildings than the village itself. Entire streets existed beneath the water that did not exist above it. Church towers, rows of houses, a marketplace, structures that had no counterparts on shore. Then darkness returned. The reflection vanished. Several members of the team claimed they imagined it. Others said nothing, but all of them had seen it. The villagers entered the water, one after another, without hesitation, without resistance. The lake swallowed them. First, their feet, then their legs, then their bodies. Yet none of them disappeared beneath the surface. Instead, they continued walking, farther, deeper, until only their heads remained visible. Then those too vanished. The last lantern faded into darkness, and the shoreline became empty, completely empty. The ritual had ended. No one understood what they had witnessed. The team returned to the research station shortly before dawn. Nobody slept. The footage was reviewed immediately. That was when they discovered something impossible. The cameras had recorded the villagers entering the water, but the recordings revealed something the researchers had not seen with their own eyes. Figures were emerging from the lake at the same time, hundreds of them. While the villagers walked into the darkness, other shapes rose from below, human silhouettes, climbing upward through the black water, watching, waiting. Some stood motionless just beneath the surface. Others slowly approached the shore. Yet nobody remembered seeing them. The cameras had, and the footage only became stranger. Every figure appeared distorted, as if their bodies were slightly wrong, too tall, too thin, their movements delayed by fractions of a second, like copies attempting to imitate real people. At 4:12 a.m., another incident occurred. Michael Hayes, one of the sonar specialists, left the station alone. Security cameras captured him walking toward the shoreline. No explanation, no message, nothing. When colleagues noticed his absence, they began searching. They found him standing knee-deep in the lake, completely still, rain pouring over his face, his eyes fixed on something beneath the water. When they called his name, he didn't respond. When they grabbed his shoulder, he finally spoke. Only 3 words. "She's down there." Nobody knew what he meant. Until later, when Michael revealed the truth. His daughter had drowned 12 years earlier, and moments before entering the water, he had seen her standing beneath the surface, smiling, waiting. The next storm arrived 2 nights later. This time, the team was prepared. Additional cameras, additional sensors, additional personnel. Everything was ready. Nothing could have prepared them for what followed. At 11:47 p.m., the village appeared again, faster than before. The houses materialized from fog. Lights ignited behind windows. Smoke rose into the storm clouds. Within minutes, the entire settlement stood where empty shoreline had existed earlier. The researchers entered immediately. This time they weren't alone. People emerged from the houses. People the team recognized. Dead people. A brother killed in a car accident. A wife lost to illness. A father buried 20 years earlier. Every researcher encountered someone they had loved, someone they had lost, someone they would do anything to see again. And every returned face spoke the same words. "We've been waiting for you." Dr. Emily Carter found her mother near the church. The woman looked exactly the same. Not older, not younger. Exactly the same. Even the scar above her eyebrow remained. Emily approached slowly. Tears mixed with rain. Her mother smiled. "You're finally here." Emily could barely breathe. How is this possible? The woman looked toward the lake. And for the first time, fear appeared on her face. Not fear of Emily, fear of something else. Something beneath the water. Then she whispered, "The village isn't returning from the lake." Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" Her mother's expression darkened, and she said something that would haunt the expedition forever. "We are hiding from what lives below." Lightning exploded overhead. The church bell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Every villager froze. Every face turned toward the water. And for the first time, they looked terrified. The storm was getting stronger, and something beneath the lake was waking up. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The entire village stood frozen beneath the storm. The church bell continued ringing, slow, heavy, ancient. Each strike echoed across the valley like a warning. The researchers looked toward the lake. At first, they saw nothing. Only rain, only darkness, only black water stretching beneath the lightning. Then the surface began to move. Not waves, not ripples. Something else, something underneath, something enormous. The villagers started backing away from the shoreline. Panic spread among them. Children cried. Doors slammed shut. Lanterns disappeared behind windows. For the first time since the expedition arrived, the villagers no longer seemed like ghosts from another era. They seemed human, terrified human beings, and whatever frightened them was coming closer. Emily grabbed her mother's arm. What is down there? The woman hesitated. Rain streamed down her face. Then she answered, "The collector." The name meant nothing, yet every villager reacted immediately. Several crossed themselves. Others lowered their heads. One elderly man began whispering prayers. Emily felt cold despite the storm. What is the collector? Her mother stared toward the lake, and her voice became little more than a whisper. It lives beneath the drowned village. Lightning illuminated the shoreline. For a fraction of a second, something appeared beneath the surface. A face, then another, then dozens. Human faces, thousands of them, pressed together beneath the water, looking upward. Eyes open, mouths moving silently, as if trapped beneath a sheet of black glass. Then, darkness swallowed them again. Several researchers screamed. Others simply stared, unable to process what they had seen. Michael Hayes dropped his flashlight. The beam spun across the shoreline and revealed footprints, fresh footprints, leading out of the lake, not toward it, out of it. Hundreds of them, as if an army had climbed onto shore while nobody was looking. The team followed the tracks, only a few yards. Then they stopped. The footprints ended abruptly. No return path, no explanation. Whatever made them was standing somewhere nearby, watching. The sonar equipment suddenly activated, even though nobody was operating it. Screens inside the research station flickered. Alarms sounded. The technicians rushed to the monitors. What appeared on the displays made no sense. The lake should have been approximately 300 feet deep. The sonar showed something entirely different. There was no bottom. The signal continued descending. 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 3,000 feet. Still no bottom. The lake extended downward impossibly far, like a shaft disappearing into endless darkness. And something massive occupied that darkness. Something larger than any known animal, larger than ships, larger than buildings. The shape stretched across the entire screen, its exact form impossible to determine. But one thing became immediately clear. It was moving upward. The church bell rang again. The villagers began running. Pure chaos erupted. Doors slammed, windows shattered. People dragged furniture against entrances. Some fell to their knees and prayed. Others fled toward the forest. Emily's mother grabbed her hand. "You need to leave." "What is happening?" "The storm is opening the door." The words made no sense. Emily tried to ask another question, but her mother shook her head. "There isn't time." A deafening sound exploded from the lake. Not thunder, not wind. A voice, a single voice, so deep it seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Every light in the village immediately went dark. The settlement disappeared into blackness. Only lightning illuminated the landscape. And during each flash, the researchers saw silhouettes standing in the water. Hundreds of them, perfectly motionless, watching the village, watching the expedition, waiting. One of the cameramen zoomed in. The footage would later become the most analyzed recording in the entire case. The figures weren't villagers. They weren't human at all. Their bodies looked unfinished, like imperfect copies. Their limbs were too long. Their faces lacked detail. Their eyes appeared as empty hollows. Yet every single one resembled someone from the expedition. The researchers were staring at distorted versions of themselves, and there were hundreds of them. Michael suddenly froze. His face went pale. He pointed toward the lake. Nobody understood why. Then they looked. A small girl stood at the shoreline. She couldn't have been older than 10. Her clothes dripped with water. Her skin looked pale beneath the lightning. Michael immediately recognized her. His daughter. The daughter who drowned 12 years earlier. The daughter he had buried. She smiled. "Come with me, Dad." Michael took a step forward, then another. The team grabbed him, held him back, but he couldn't stop staring. Tears streamed down his face. The girl continued smiling. Then she pointed toward the center of the lake, toward something rising beneath the water, something impossibly large, something finally reaching the surface. And when lightning struck again, everyone saw it. A city, an entire city beneath the lake. Churches, roads, thousands of buildings, stretching endlessly into darkness below. And above the city, something alive was moving between the streets. Something that had been sleeping for centuries. And now it was awake. The city should not have existed. Every law of nature, every scientific principle, every explanation the expedition had relied upon for years, collapsed in a matter of seconds. The lake wasn't hiding ruins. It wasn't concealing a lost settlement. It contained an entire world, a drowned world, one that extended far beyond the dimensions of the valley itself. And something ruled over it. Lightning illuminated the depths again. This time, the researchers saw more. Massive streets disappeared into darkness. Cathedrals larger than skyscrapers. Bridges stretching across impossible distances. Entire districts buried beneath black water. Yet the most disturbing detail wasn't the city. It was the people. Millions of figures stood motionless throughout the streets below, not moving, not speaking, simply standing, as though waiting for instructions or awaiting judgment. No one knew how many there were. Thousands. Millions, perhaps more. The deeper cameras attempted to zoom, the more figures appeared. An endless population beneath the lake, an impossible civilization of the dead. Then the thing moving among them stopped. For the first time, it stopped and looked upward, toward the surface, toward the storm, toward them. The research station lost power immediately. Every monitor died. Every light vanished. Generators failed simultaneously. The valley plunged into darkness. Only lightning remained. And during every flash, the shape seemed closer, much closer. Emily's mother tightened her grip. "You have to leave now." Emily shook her head. "What is that thing?" The woman's expression changed. Not fear, not terror. Something worse. Recognition. The expression of someone seeing an old nightmare return. "It remembers us." The answer sent a chill through Emily's body. "What remembers you?" Her mother looked toward the water. "The thing that keeps us here." Another thunderclap exploded across the valley. The lake erupted. Water surged upward like a volcanic explosion. Entire waves rose hundreds of feet into the air. Researchers were thrown to the ground. Trees snapped. Windows shattered. The storm had become something else entirely. It no longer felt natural. It felt alive. Through the chaos came voices, hundreds of voices, thousands, millions, whispering, crying, calling names. The researchers heard familiar voices, dead relatives, lost friends, former lovers, parents, children. Everyone heard someone. The lake knew exactly who to call, exactly who to tempt, exactly who they wanted to hear most. Michael heard his daughter again, closer now, much closer. "Dad." He looked toward the shoreline. She stood only a few feet away. Rain poured over her face. She looked exactly as she had before the accident. Not pale, not ghostly. Alive, completely alive. She smiled and held out her hand. "Come home." The words broke something inside him. Years of grief, years of guilt, years of regret. Gone. Replaced by hope. For one terrible moment, he believed her before anyone could stop him. Michael ran straight toward the lake. The team shouted. Several researchers chased him. But the shoreline had changed. The village was disappearing. Buildings faded into fog. Roads dissolved. Entire houses vanished between flashes of lightning. The storm was consuming everything. Michael reached the water. His daughter waited, smiling, her hand still extended. Only inches separated them. Then lightning illuminated her face, and everyone saw the truth. It wasn't her. The smile was wrong, too wide. The eyes were wrong, too dark. The proportions subtly distorted, like a perfect imitation created by something that had never actually seen a human before. Something pretending, something learning, something hungry. Michael saw it too. For a second, his expression changed. Recognition, horror, understanding. Then, the thing wearing his daughter's face smiled even wider and whispered, "You always come closer." The water exploded. A black arm erupted from beneath the surface, longer than a tree trunk, covered in shifting human faces. Hundreds of faces screaming silently. It wrapped around Michael's body and dragged him into the lake. He didn't even have time to scream. The water closed. The shoreline became still. Michael Hayes was gone. No body surfaced. No trace remained. Only ripples spreading across the black water. And beneath them, something enormous continued rising. The villagers began praying, all of them, together. The sound echoed through the storm. Ancient words, ancient warnings, ancient fear. Emily looked at her mother. For the first time, she noticed tears in the woman's eyes. What happens now? The woman stared toward the center of the lake, where a colossal shadow was beginning to emerge, and whispered, "We hide until the storm ends." Then her voice broke. "Or we become part of the city." The shadow beneath the lake continued rising, and for the first time in more than a century, the surface began to crack. The dead emerged from the lake, one after another, hundreds, then thousands. The shoreline filled with figures dripping black water. Some wore clothing from decades earlier. Others appeared almost modern. A few looked as though they had died only yesterday. None of them spoke. None of them blinked. They simply walked, slowly, silently, toward the living. The surviving researchers fled toward the forest. Vehicles refused to start. Electronics malfunctioned. Radios produced only static. Even satellite phones were dead. It was as if the storm had isolated the entire valley from the rest of the world. There would be no rescue, no outside help, no escape. Emily ran through sheets of rain. Branches whipped against her face. Mud dragged at her boots. Behind her, she could hear footsteps. Hundreds of footsteps, growing louder, closer. She looked back once and immediately wished she hadn't. The dead weren't chasing anyone. They were searching. Each face scanned the darkness, examining trees, examining rocks, examining every hiding place, like hunters looking for prey. Then several of them stopped simultaneously and looked directly at her. Emily felt terror unlike anything she had ever known, because she recognized some of the faces. Her mother, Michael, villagers from Blackwater Cove, people who should not exist, all staring at her, all smiling, the same unnatural smile, the smile of something pretending to be human. And somewhere beyond them, the collector continued rising. The mountains shook again. The valley echoed with another impossible sound. Not a roar, not a scream, a breath. Something beneath the earth inhaled. The storm intensified immediately. Lightning struck the lake every few seconds. The sky appeared to tear open. For brief moments, the entire valley became visible. And during those flashes, the researchers saw the truth. The collector was larger than the city itself. What they had believed to be streets, districts, entire neighborhoods, were actually growing from its body. The city wasn't beneath the creature. The city was part of the creature. Every building, every road, every church, every soul, one impossible organism, an ancient intelligence built from the dead. And it was finally reaching the surface. The last remaining members of the expedition gathered inside an abandoned ranger station deep in the forest. Only 6 remained alive. Out of 23, the others had vanished, taken by the lake, or lured into the darkness. Nobody knew which. The building shook as thunder rolled overhead. Everyone sat in silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Outside, the footsteps continued, thousands of them, walking through the woods, searching. Hours passed, perhaps longer. Time itself felt broken. Then came the knock. 3 slow knocks. Everyone froze. Another knock followed, then another. Finally, a voice, soft, familiar. Emily. Her blood turned cold. It was her mother's voice. One of the researchers moved toward the door. Emily grabbed his arm. No. The voice returned. Emily, please. The tone sounded perfect, exactly like her mother. Exactly. Then another voice joined it. Michael. Then another. And another. Soon, dozens of voices surrounded the cabin. Friends, family, loved ones, people the researchers had lost throughout their lives. Each voice begging to be let inside. Each voice sounding completely real, until one of them made a mistake, a small mistake. One word spoken incorrectly, a memory used in the wrong context. And suddenly everyone understood. These weren't the dead. The collector was learning, studying, imitating, trying to understand humanity by wearing human faces, trying to lure new souls into the city beneath the lake. The realization shattered whatever hope remained. There would be no reunion, no miracle, no return from death, only imitation, only hunger, only the collector. Outside, the voices stopped. The silence that followed was even worse, because for the first time, the researchers could hear something moving between the trees, something enormous. Branches snapped, entire trunks cracked. The ground trembled. Whatever was approaching dwarfed the forest itself. The cabin windows darkened, not because of clouds, because something had blocked the sky. Emily looked through a crack in the boards and saw a wall of flesh, faces, millions of faces, stretching higher than the tallest trees, moving slowly through the valley, watching, searching, remembering. The collector had found them. Nobody screamed. The terror had become too large for screaming. Then something unexpected happened. The storm began weakening. The thunder grew distant. The rain softened. The lightning became less frequent. Dawn was approaching, and with dawn, the village would disappear. The question was whether the collector would disappear with it. The giant mass stopped moving for the first time. The endless faces turned toward the eastern horizon, toward the first traces of morning light. The creature understood. Its time was ending. A sound emerged from the valley, a sound of frustration, of rage, of loss. The collector began sinking, slowly, reluctantly. The dead followed. Thousands of figures turned away from the forest, turned away from the survivors, and began walking back toward the lake, back toward the city, back toward whatever waited below. The storm was ending, and the door was closing. One by one, the dead vanished into fog. The city lights faded. The village dissolved. The lake became still. By sunrise, everything was gone. Only 6 researchers remained, 6 witnesses, 6 survivors, or so they believed. Epilogue. The official report was never released. Government agencies confiscated most recordings. Several files disappeared. Others were classified. The Blackwater Lake expedition was quietly dissolved. The public never learned the truth. Emily Carter spent months reviewing the surviving footage, searching for answers, searching for proof, searching for her mother. She found none, until one night, nearly 6 months later, a new storm appeared over another lake hundreds of miles away. A storm identical to the one at Blackwater. Meteorological data matched perfectly. Emily immediately accessed satellite imagery and saw something impossible. A village that did not exist, standing beside the distant shoreline. The same church, the same streets, the same houses. Blackwater Cove returned, but larger, much larger. Emily zoomed in. People moved through the streets, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands. Then she recognized a face, Michael Hayes, standing beside one of the cottages, smiling. Another face, a cameraman lost during the expedition. Another, and another, and another. Every missing member of the team was there, walking through the village, as though they had always belonged there, as though they had never left. Emily stared at the image for a long time. Then she noticed one final detail. All of them were looking upward, not at the sky, not at the storm, at the satellite itself, at her. And every one of them was smiling. The transmission ended 3 seconds later. The image corrupted. The village disappeared. But before the screen went black, a final shape became visible beneath the water. Something larger than before. Much larger. Still growing. Still collecting. And waiting for the next storm. No return address. No note. No explanation. Inside was a single flash drive. Nothing else. At first, she assumed it was a prank. Then, she opened the file. The recording lasted only 37 seconds. Most of it was corrupted, static, distortion, fragments of sound. But eventually the image stabilized, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The camera was inside a small wooden house. Oil lamps flickered against old walls. Rain battered the windows. Thunder rolled somewhere outside. Emily recognized the room immediately. One of the houses from Blackwater Cove. A house that should not exist. A village that should not exist. Yet there it was, recorded after the expedition had ended, recorded after the village had vanished, recorded after Michael Hayes had died. Then Michael stepped into view. He looked exactly the same, not older, not injured, not drowned, alive, perfectly alive. He sat down at a wooden table. For several seconds, he said nothing. He simply stared into the darkness, as though listening to something beyond the walls, something only he could hear. Then he slowly turned toward the camera, not toward the cameraman, not toward the room, directly toward the lens, directly toward whoever would eventually watch the recording. And he spoke. We thought the lake was the entrance. Silence followed. Only rain, only thunder, only static. Then Michael smiled. Very slowly, very unnaturally. It isn't. The lamp beside him flickered. For a brief moment, the room went dark. When the light returned, something enormous stood outside the window. Not a person, not an animal, not anything that should exist. A shadow so large it blocked the entire storm. The entire sky disappeared behind it. Michael's smile widened. The lake is where it feeds. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room. This time Michael looked frightened, truly frightened. More frightened than anyone had ever seen him. His eyes shifted toward the doorway behind him, as though something had entered the house, something he hadn't expected. The color drained from his face. Then he whispered 3 final words. "It's here." The recording ended instantly. No static, no fade out, no explanation, just black. Emily spent days analyzing the file, frame by frame, pixel by pixel, searching for clues, searching for evidence, searching for anything that might explain what she had seen. Then she discovered something. A single frame hidden near the end of the recording. One frame. Less than a fraction of a second. Easy to miss. Impossible to forget. The frame showed the reflection in the rain-covered window. Not the house. Not the storm. Not the forest. Blackwater Cove. The entire village, but larger than before. Far larger. Millions of people filled its streets. Not hundreds, not thousands. Millions. And among them stood every person who had ever disappeared near the lake. Every missing researcher, every lost villager, every victim, every soul the lake had ever taken. All of them staring toward the house, all of them waiting. And behind them, beyond the village, beyond the city, beneath the water, stood something so vast that it covered half the horizon. Something larger than the collector. Something the collector itself seemed to fear. And judging by the shape emerging from the darkness, it had only just begun to wake up. The real end. But somewhere during the next storm, Blackwater Cove will return.